I'm Olivia Clark, and I started Live for Prairie, a seed restoration company near Madison, Wisconsin in 2010. With that, I restore prairies, I do retention ponds, city libraries, and also backyard restorations. I also do restoration work with research there are quite a few invasive species in our community, including our campus community. I have found at least 3 different invasive species in our campus landscaping that I sometimes pull up, a few of those being Queen Anne's lace and bird's foot trefoil. When you go into the bluffs, there's also quite a bit of invasive species. You're dealing with a lot of buckthorn, especially in Hickson. I know there's a lot of groups trying to remove those invasive species, but it is an extremely overwhelming job with the amount of invasive species that are there, and not being able to burn in those areas too also is problematic for eradicating those species in those ecosystems. There's also a ton of invasive species when you get into the wetland parts of La Crosse, including that reed canary grass, which I mentioned before, which is a very dominant wetland invader across the whole country. Recreational activities are a easy way for invasive species seeds to get around. There's a few species seeds that will actually stick to your clothing, and when you walk around, you're just spreading them around. So whether you be hiking or biking, the seeds are definitely making their way around to different locations. Also, with boating, a lot of invasive species will stick to the bottom of your boat. That's why it's really critical for people to clean their boats going between bodies of water. But that is a very easy gateway for invasive species to spread. There are several regulations for people to prevent the spread of invasive species. So whether that be by cleaning your boat, between bodies of water, and also just staying on trail. When people venture off trail, they often will find themselves in invasive species, especially in certain hiking trails in La Crosse. And once you get in those trails or go off those trails, you'll either be encountered by invasive species that are extremely prickly and will hurt you, or you could potentially run into wild parsnip. That the defense chemical, that sap that's in wild parsnip, can actually get on your skin and cause severe burns if you're out in the sun. And some people, actually quite a few, are hospitalized each year because of those wild parsnip burns on their skin. First thing to prevent any invasive species spread is just to educate yourself on what's invasive and factors about that plant. So the educational side is definitely step 1. Step 2 would be taking an action to do it, whether it be removing, like I said, buckthorn before, from your yard, or helping with several work days that they have up in Hickson Forest to remove these invasive species, helping with prescribed burns. Also just like keeping an eye on your friends and family and making sure that they're doing their best too to stop the spread of invasive species. So if you're on someone's boat, be like, hey, make sure to wash it, or don't be like weird, but make it like educational for everybody and in the best interest of the environment.
Invasive species is kind of an outside biological, it can be plant or animal-based kind of organism that comes into an environment and takes over and kind of like takes away from the other organisms that were living there before, I'd say.
To me, invasive species are species that are not commonly found here or native to the area.
Probably 5. Not very much.
Probably like a 2. I know some, but not a lot.
Okay. How educated do you think people are on invasive species in general?
Probably not super well educated. I know myself I'm not super well educated about invasive species around Wisconsin or anywhere else.
Awareness is one. I mean, I obviously didn't off the top of my head know exactly what an invasive species is, and there's also like what kinds of invasive species are like affecting our area, what we should be conscious of. I think if people just kind of knew what they were looking for, they'd be able to help that sort of problem better.
Basically just awareness of like what kinds are found in Wisconsin and how to not really bring them to different places, or how to prevent them from being in here.